Hey YouTube, just wanted to show you what I'm doing with my FMS Moa. I just have the fuselage here, and as you can see it's got a little JST connector, which should be fine if you're going to be using JST ended batteries. But I'm going to be using XT60 ends, which are what I use all the time on my airplanes, barring extremely large batteries and strange circumstances like really small planes. This plane is not particularly small in my opinion, so I'm just going to reach into my bag of goodies here. I'm going to get the appropriate female connector, even though technically it would be a male connector. And we're going to put this XT60 on. There's nothing magical about the black color. They're out of stock in the yellow, which is what I would normally do. I really could care less what color it is. Alright, so as you can see, one thing that's nice about the JST is it makes it a little bit easier. There's not that much room. You can get your finger underneath this tray for the batteries. And with an XT60, you'll still be able to fit it under there to get to the ESC, which is not a big ESC, by the way. I'm not expecting this to be really fast, but it's good. It's a glider, guys, so it's going to be awesome. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this back here just a little bit, because I sure hate to waste this and not make it useful for any other projects. Now, one trick if you're going from a relatively small wire into a large connector is you can increase the surface area a little bit by doubling or tripling up the thickness of the wire. And it's kind of nice if they're the same amount of stripped back lead. So I will go ahead and just kind of hold that there, and that'll give us a reference point for how much we want to strip back. Alright, so we'll set this stuff aside. You see I've got a pretty good amount. Obviously it's more than we need to get into the connector there. But we'll be able to double that back on itself. So we'll zoom in here for you and we'll just show you how we do this. It's super easy. I do it on virtually every plane. I sort of feel bad even making a video of it. Soldering iron's been heating up. Nothing too terribly special on the soldering iron. It's just a 40-watt Weller's cheapie. You can get them for like 15, 16 bucks, and I use the heck out of mine. Okay, so I'm going to just double this up a little bit, or not double it up, but I'm going to braid it, twist it, whatever you want to call that. I'm not actually braiding, I guess I'm twisting. And then I'm going to take it, I'm going to double it back on itself. So it's about 50-50. Okay? And then I'm going to make sure the fit's okay. You can see that there's a little marking on there that says plus or minus. Of course, plus is going to be red. Minus will be black. Okay, and you can see how that sits down in there. You're probably thinking, well, don't you want copper exposed there? Yeah, I do. I do, but it's not super critical on this plane. I'll probably go ahead and take a little bit more off just to be on the safe side. Take another 1/4 inch or so. That way we got a little better bite. We'll of course do that on the black and the red side. Okay, so now that we've got that stripped, and of course you lose a couple of strands sometimes when you work with this really, really fine stuff. And now I'm going to go about 1/3 and fold it. Make a little ball. Verify the positive side, which is here, the flatter side, if you will. Okay, you need to go a little bit more. Okay, so we'll just see if that's about right. And that looks pretty darn good right there. So the copper stops right at the edge. The thing that's nice about this silicone wire is it doesn't really shrink back the way that some other like PVC cables would. Okay, so obviously we need to get some heat shrink on there so we can shrink it down when we're done. I'm going to grab some red and black. Be right back to you. Okay, so if you guys are going to order this from Hobby King, this is the red part number. Okay, and then this is the black part number. So nothing too particular about this heat shrink. Just cut off about an inch or so and then that'll give you plenty. You'll want to slide that back so it keeps the heat away from your soldering work. And then you can pull it back up when you're ready to slide it on. It's kind of nice having all these tangled cables because it keeps them from sliding back up. Okay, so this is our positive side, so we'll go ahead and get that in a position where we feel like the wire is comfortable. Clean the tip of your soldering iron. Scrape it clean with something like that. Get the tip clean with the chemical if you need to. You don't have to prep it like that, but it just makes for a little better solder joint, especially now with a small wire like this. What I'm doing is I'm just melting a little bit to get the contact made so I can dissipate the heat better with the solder. The solder will make better surface area. And what I've got is a pillow that this thing is sitting on, just an old crappy pillow. Nice for holding the plane. Of course, you can get a plane stand. There's a million different tools you can buy at the hobby store that are nice. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to poo-poo any of those tools. Some of those tools are very nice. But, you know, I'm kind of a realist. I understand a lot of you guys are not going to go out to the hobby store and buy every little thing at the hobby store that is available. I had somebody give me trouble the other day on a video because I wasn't using like a reaming tool or some ridiculous like specialty tool that you're going to use like 14 times in your life. So anyway, for those people, sorry. I don't usually use specialty tools unless I absolutely need them, and I use them constantly. So now if you're trying to do this and you're really trying to get her nice, you can actually plug this into a female end and it will help to dissipate the heat for you while you're doing your soldering. But you certainly don't have to. You don't have to do that. So I'm going to zoom out just so you guys can get a little better view of the big picture here. Cleaning the tip. Just going to put the solder over here. It's kind of trying to walk away from me. There's so much room in this connector. I feel bad. I usually kind of fill up the connector with solder, but real leaded solder is heavy. So I'm going to go too crazy on it. Okay, so just hold it until the solder sits still and make sure it's more or less in the position you want it to be. It's kind of annoying to do this right now because okay, so that's good. Now the solder's not moving when I let go. It's kind of annoying when you have to sit there and hold it. And there I got a little bit of a drip on the back side of the solder joint. Not a big deal, it's just solder kind of has a mind of its own. It flows where it needs to flow, you know. Okay, so I'm going to twist this up a little bit. I'm going to go about 1/3 down, give it a fold toward itself. Slide that into the socket here. And for the record, if you guys are wondering, this connection is very hot right now. Okay, so now I'm just going to get a little bit... Oh, almost forgot my heat shrink, guys. By the way, if you forget your heat shrink, just do it again, because that's pretty much the only choice. So don't forget your heat shrink. Okay, so let's slip that in there. Gonna get a little bit of solder on the tip. The solder will help make the physical contact between the two pieces, and that's how you can dissipate the heat from the tip of your soldering iron into your work. If you just try to touch the work, it's only going to work so well. In fact, it's going to work pretty poorly because you don't have very much contact area. So you use the solder to actually bridge onto your work, and then that's how you transmit the heat from the tip of the hot soldering iron into your work. I don't know if I've said that like 15 times in this video. It feels like I have. Sorry if I have, guys. A little warm. So normally you don't want to push the solder into the tip, but I'm using the tip to hold the wire where I want the wire. Just kind of holding it still. I'm pushing against the wires to help force the wires into the position I want them to be when this is all done. And see, it's still so hot, it just wants to let it go and slip out there. So I may go ahead and grab it with these forceps. Remember, this is not a battery, so it's not live or energized, but just be careful you don't do that with an energized circuit, because you can touch the battery leads and short it out through your forceps. Okay, so I'm going to hold this in this angle, because it's getting, the connector is pretty warm, but also this is going to give me the opportunity to use my other hands to position the wires, because I can use my belly to hold this where it needs to be. Heating it up. Man, that wire heats up quick. Okay, so now this would be fine, but I'm just more meticulous than that. I want it to be better than that. I don't want that little piece sticking up there. And when I say piece, I mean there's a little bit of exposed copper on the top. The heat shrink would cover it just fine, but I don't want it to be that way. I want it to be better. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to fill a little bit more solder into this hole. And then I'm going to manipulate the wire. And I'm going to hold it. And it's going to be hot, and it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable for a second. But now it's starting to change from super bright, shiny, to a little bit more dull. That's when you can tell that your solder is setting up. So now we should be good to go to continue on to the next step, which is super easy and very obvious, and that's going to be to pull the heat shrink up so we can put this crap out of the way. Shut off your soldering iron. Now this would be the time if you knew you were going to run your LEDs, if you're adding LEDs later, you'd maybe take a connector or something like this, and you would solder that in parallel there, and then you can tap power later. Well, we're not going to do that because this is going to be a fairly tight connection area, and secondly, this is a 2S configuration, so I'm probably going to run lights off of the servo 5-volt BEC circuit as opposed to running it off of the actual full level battery voltage circuit. And that's for the simple fact that the BEC voltage is not going to change if you go from a 3S to a 2S. And I'm not 100% sure this is going to run on 2S well. I think that's what it calls for, but it may be okay with a little bit bigger, and I might utilize that later. Okay, so now we're just going to heat this up, shrink down our wires, keeping the heat away from the foam as much as we can. Given the fact that we are fairly close to foam and there's a certain amount of risk you take doing this, you got to be careful. And I'm getting a little aggressive with the heat. I'm heating it more than I normally would because there's such a high compression from the XT60 size down to the smaller wire. And so now that we've got that, we'll just kind of squish those wires so that they point together while they're nice and hot. A little extra malleability there. And you can see that's what it looks like now. So that should work nicely for us. Verifying the color code a couple of different times throughout the process. This is minus, and then this is plus. So there you have it, guys. Now we've got our XT60 installed on our Moa. And the next step, of course, is going to be the rest of the assembly. So just wanted to show you how to do that if you didn't already know how. Oh, incidentally, these XT60s, if you like the Lemon RX receivers I'm using, you can buy these at Lemon RX for like 50 cents for a pair. So it's a super good deal. Anyway, thanks a lot for watching, guys. Don't forget to like and subscribe.